So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and as I'm recording this we are marching very close towards Christmas, but by the time this comes out, this will be in the new year, but fortunately of course January is still in the darkest depths of winter, so this rather wintry theme still makes a certain amount of sense. But it's good to see the Grey Havens again, because it's been a little while since we last saw it, and it's obviously a very fine settlement indeed. Interesting to see how long the deployment actually took this time around. I always get a little bit confused when people elect to micromanage their deployments in this detailed a fashion when you're on the defence, because to be honest with you, it's not really that necessary. Like, you can just put your units in the ballpark of where you need them, and then you can move them after that. But people do so love to get everything nice and set up, only for all their preparation to mean absolutely nothing when the enemy actually engage them and start attacking towards the walls. But of course, the Grey Havens. An interesting settlement actually, because the outer gates tend to see a lot of action. The middle portion of the settlement, however, is often where the attackers get their joy, because they can hunt the defenders down as they scramble backwards very often to go back to the final stand, which is of course on this island here. Two nice choke points on these two bridges with the aqueducts above them. However, it is still two choke points, and you have to have a good amount of strength on either one, so very often the attackers retreat with not enough left. So it will be quite interesting to see how they decide to manage this battle, and it is going to be a law-friendly battle, because we have the landlords of this location in Lindon. There's no Lindon units in the immediate vicinity, but Lindon are going to be joined by two units of primarily DUNEDAIN forces from Arthedain, which is interesting. So their nearest neighbours coming to their aid as the forces of darkness crash down upon them, which I think for the most part are Umbar armies. So it's almost like the Black Numenorian invasion script over in DAC, which is quite interesting. So, as is the norm, we shall go through the attacking armies first and foremost, starting off with Pandamaidar, who is playing as one of the Umbar armies. He's got some Alcarondas Legion. So when you're facing off against Umbar, one thing that you can't really rely upon is the fact that you'll be able to easily overpower them 1-for-1 in melee, like you can with the Orcs, because the Black Numenorians are much better at looking after themselves, and overall, in terms of their infantry, I would say they outperform Arthedain in most areas. There are a few areas where Arthedain do have the edge, but for the most part, especially in terms of a unit like this, the Alcarondas Legion, in terms of line infantry, Umbar easily have the beating of Arthedain. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting indeed to see what Umbar have also decided to prioritise in terms of what they have brought. I do actually agree with the decision to bring the Balakith Shield Bearers. The armour upgrade is nice, it gives them more of a defensive edge to them. But I agree with them because while they don't tend to perform as well as something like the Flagrim or the Nurad Footmen, I've noticed, or at least not for their cost. They tend to be a little bit worse off. The armour piercing is still going to be useful when two Arthedain armies are on the defence, and they will still do quite well against the rank and file from Arthedain, like the men-at-arms. Also a good decision to bring the pikemen, the Balagai pikes, because yeah, they will be outperformed. This is one area where Arthedain have got certainly more numerous pikes, and obviously Lindon also have got a bit of a focus around pikemen as well, so it will be quite difficult to actually win that particular war. But Umbar do have the ability to do so, both in terms of numbers with these Balagai pikes, but more substantially, the strongest pike that any of those factions I've mentioned already have are the Naru Sentinels. Only Imladris and Khazad-dûm can count themselves as having a better unit of pikes than Umbar, the ones Umbar and Numenor both share. Shielded as well, so they're not quite as vulnerable to the normal plays against pikemen on a walled siege like this. Balagai Footmen, so you have to cut corners somewhere when you're on the attack, obviously, and the Balagai Footmen are just a nice, dependable unit of spears. They won't do a ton of damage though, it is worth saying. Got some Harbingers of Castamere back here as well. Nice unit of heavy swordsmen of the bodyguard tier. It will be quite interesting to see how they can perform when mixed in and amongst all of the other Umbar units that are here, more Alcarondas Legion. Balakith Axguard as well. Generally speaking, they're a little bit better at what they do than the Shield Bearers, purely because they have that extra damage, and in terms of the armour values and such, they're they're much the same when you upgrade their armour like this. They don't have a shield, of course, which can leave them more vulnerable to arrow fire, which both Lindon, but especially Arthedain, actually can exploit, but if they get into melee against Arthedain, they should do quite well for themselves. Corsair Blackguards, nice, again, those javelins, we've seen them be very effective recently as well, and they can double as being decent infantry in melee as well. They're not going to win any real quality contests against Lindon or Arthedain, but they can at least contribute in the late game when their javelins have been used up. Alcarondas Legion are back over here as well, and that's pretty much it from him. So moving on to his nearest ally, Impager. He has got some Balagai Footmen as well, and they're going to be pushing up the siege towers and the rams also. just in behind these siege towers. He's got some Balakith Axe Guard. They don't have the armour upgrade though, and that is significant because the Balakith units, when they don't have the armour upgrade, do actually lack a little bit in the armour department for the cost of the unit. Having said that, they do also have a little bit more melee defense than your standard heavy axeman of this cost will run you. Stuff like the... well, I guess the Westmark Marshals are actually a little bit above the tier of the Balakith Axe Guard, but again, the point still stands, the fact they do actually have decent melee defense for a heavy axe unit. Still not going to mean they can outperform the Elves of Lindon, but still, it's nice to have. Alcarondas Legion, a couple units of them, a couple units of the Corsair Blackguards, and just in behind we have the Harbingers of Castamere as well. More, well actually no, this is, I thought this was the Sentinels for a second, but it's not, it's the Arthedain Shield Guard. Very tanky, we've seen them actually be very, very effective quite recently in the mountain battle in which we saw Umbar dig out a victory, albeit it was thanks to that Isengard Ballista shot at the end, but the Arthedain Shield Guard, when combined with even a basic unit of pikes, makes for a very solid front line. They won't do an awful lot of damage, of course, against Lindon or against Arthedain for different reasons, but still, they will help the attack keep going for longer. Balakire archers, you do need to bring some archers. That is one thing that I would say, was a bit lacking in the army you've already seen. You do need some archers so that later on you can start skirmishing with the enemy, because that's where Lindon and even Arthedain, if they've gone too heavy into DUNEDAIN units, could be a little bit vulnerable. They won't get their costs back if they are skirmishing with Balakire archers constantly. And some Warlords of Umbar, some very, very nasty units of Lance Knights looking resplendent as always. And they of course will be patrolling around the outside, hoping that they don't have to deal with any potential sally outs, but that's risky, especially when you're dealing with cavalry as expensive as the ones that the elves traffic in. Rhudaur, they have to travel a far shorter distance in terms of geographical position than Umbar. They might actually arrive at around the same time though, because Umbar's ships can sail fairly quickly, whereas Rhudaur will have to walk most of the way. Some upgraded Rhudaur clansmen, they'll be decent for soaking up that punishment in the initial waves. And he has also gone for some Rhudaur marksmen as well to put some pressure on that range. Again, they won't win any skirmish fights 1-to-1, but you don't need to as the attackers. You just need to occupy the enemy archers, especially when they're as dangerous as Elven and DUNEDAIN archers can be. Lots of Rhudaur swordsmen, so in this case, of course, they're no Alcarondas Legion, but there are far more of them, and you can utilise them a little bit more freely without worrying about essentially throwing your money down the drain. Grenadine Berserkers, so they don't have a lot of ammunition with their throwing axes, but nasty throwing axes, and then essentially a unit of multiple HP shock infantry in melee. They do lack a little bit for something like melee defense, however, that's not really the point of them. The point of them is to charge into melee, throw their axes first, and then get in and do a bunch of armor-piercing damage. Again, more useful against Arthedain than Lindon. Ettenmore's Trollhunters, nice armour on these boys, so they're going to be able to withstand a bit more punishment, then get into position, throw those javelins in, as we saw in the Longbottom siege that was recent. Rhudaur clansmen, got some Arthedain pikes who always seem to perform very, very nicely. Again, shielded. They're not on the same level as the Naru Sentinels, of course, but they are far cheaper, and they help tie things together quite nicely for Rhudaur as well. Some goblins are pushing up this catapult as well, so they can start peeling away at some of those fortifications, and a unit of Coldfell Maidens which can join with the Warlords of Umbar in keeping these outer reaches of the settlement clear of enemy cavalry that wants to sally forth. Then we have Tsunami playing as Angmar, again much the same way as Rhudaur. They would have had to walk here, but now that they're here I'm sure they are ready for battle. Blackwatch Legion will be good at pushing through especially Lindon defences, because they'll be a little bit more light both in terms of armour and manpower on the front line. But also pushing through Arthedain pike blocks may be where they have to use the Blackwatch Legion depending on how the defence goes. Blackwatch Legion, oh not Blackwatch Legion, Witch Realm Blackguard I should say. Very, very nasty unit of bodyguard infantry, of course, very dependable for Angmar. We also have the Gundabad Guard, who of course have got their stolen dwarven arms and armour. Nice unit of heavier spears. We've got some Snaga, again, very, very cheap, to the point of being almost free, so you're often going to see them, and they're obviously going to push up the ram and not be too concerned about the losses they take. Angmar Halberds, they're going to get ripped apart by Lindon in most aspects, but they could be useful if you can get them into a sustained fight against Arthedain, provided they're not against pikes. To be honest, I'm not sure about the halberd pick the more I think about it. A couple of units of Witch Realm pikemen, much more on board with that, especially with the armour upgrade. It makes them tanky, means they can contest that long pike game. Even if they don't outright win it, it can prove to be a little bit of a problem because it'll make the defence less efficient than it could otherwise have been. We've got some Guardians of Khan Doom with the upgrade as well, just making Angmar that a little bit more solid. More Witch Realm Inquisitors is getting to the point now where if the defenders have invested in no cavalry at all, this cavalry could prove to be a bit more of an anchor than an assistance to the attackers. Yeah. because this is a lot of money they've spent, so they kind of need to get their money back on it. And we've also got some Trolls of Gundabad and some Trolls of Angmar, and there are also some units back here as well, which is yet another unit of Angmar halberds. And then the final attacking army, we have Numenor, played by Lord Touchme, so he's going to have quite a similar outlook, I would say, to Umbar. Numenorian cohort will perform much as the same role as the Alcarondas Legion, and unlike the three armies in front of the Grey Havens, the ones to the north and south do have the quality in and amongst them to actually contest with Arthedain and even Lindon. A couple of units of cohort. Seafarers of Nindamos, very, very similar to the Corsair Blackguards. We've also got some Balagai pikemen, another unit of Balagai pikemen, the mighty Royal Legion of Armenelos, and then he's also got some cavalry, so another unit of attacking cavalry in the Pharazim nobles. There's a lot of cav on display for the attackers. More Balagai footmen. He's got some steel bows. Be very interesting to see how he uses them. It could be that we are paying attention in another portion of the battlefield and he dumps all of his ammunition very quickly. That's often how it goes with the steel bows, it seems. But that can be, it really is make or break for them. They're a difficult unit to use correctly, but if you do, they can be very useful. And then two more units of Numenorian cohort with their siege towers. So, scary force. Numbers, quality, armour piercing, cavalry, all the sort of things that can make your life quite difficult as a defender. Vivarax, however, is the player who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. He's got some Dunedain Peacekeepers up on the wall. Normally they're a very strong unit, but you would back the Numenorian cohort over the Dunedain Peacekeepers. Dunedain Peacekeepers are a little bit better equipped for dealing with sort of lower end units, so the Balagai will struggle mightily against a unit like the Peacekeepers, but we shall see how it goes. I mean, if you back the Peacekeepers up, they can even give the cohort a good run for their money, but we shall see. Evendim Spearmen, as I constantly say, one of the most misleading units in the game, given how elite they look when you upgrade their armour. They're not. They're Militia Spears, so Militia Spears will struggle mightily against anything Numenor have which is of any quality at all. One of the best militia units in the game, though, is worth saying, and they always have been, the Evendim. Dunedain Rangers, very, very dangerous unit potentially, that Numenor is going to have to tangle with as they move forwards. And is that it? That is looking like all she wrote for that defence. To be fair, Numenor are pretty stretched themselves, so it'll be interesting to see who gets the better end of this particular fight. Over here, Son of the Dunedain is playing as one of the other Arthedain army, so living up to his namesake. Some Arthedain marksmen without the armour upgrade, but they're just going to be here trying to get as many kills as they can with their bows and then just standing in the way. Very much a sort of quantity kind of unit that they're going to use on the defence here. It's just an all-purpose thing. Got some Dunedain Troll Slayers from Vivarax. Again, pretty much a must-bring, I would say, because they're so good at what they do. They do a lot of damage at range with their javelins and in melee with their armour-piercing axes. They're multiple HP as well. They are expensive, but they are actually an example of unit I think is quite easy to use in many ways because of that. So, yeah, the damage they do is too good to ignore, and he's got two units of them pointing in the direction of Numenor. Arthedain Man-at-Arms up on this wall. They'll do even worse, even with the armour upgrades, than the Peacekeepers will against stuff like Numenorian cohort, but numbers can be key. Two more units of Evendim Spearmen guarding the gate, and then another unit of Arthedain Man-at-Arms. So the Rangers over there with better infantry. Two units of Troll Slayers, however, is substantial for their melee contribution as well. Then over here we have Dunedain Peacekeepers, once again, Arthedain Men-at-Arms. Son of the Dunedain has also elected to have some upgraded Arthedain Pikemen, which is a very common pick. It makes your defence is much more solid. There is cavalry here. Vivarax has got some Knights of Numenor and some Grey Company, as well as some Numenor Gate Guards over here. It's going to be difficult to use that cavalry. They really need to be very, very careful about how they use it, because the Witch Realm Inquisitors win that fight in melee, as you would expect from sword cavalry. We shall have to wait and see. Arthedain Men-at-Arms, some Dunedain Peacekeepers, and some Gate Guards. We've got some Dunedain, some Evendim Spears, which is the first level of armour upgrade, which to be honest with you should be about as far as it goes in my opinion, because you can tell they're still militia with the extra bits of metal that they don when you upgrade their armour only the once. It's much more in keeping with what they actually are in my opinion. Dunedain Rangers and Wardens of the North getting ready to back up that gate as well. Some more Dunedain Rangers and some more Wardens of the North, so a real field of fire here coming in. Some more Troll Slayers at the top of the hill, this time from Son of the Dunedain, as well as his dismounted Knights of Numenor, and some Dunedain Rangers as well. We'll start to be getting into some more Elven units as we enter the southern portion of the settlement, starting with the Harlanden Guard, played by Morris, it's worth saying. Harlanden Guard, double as spears, so they could potentially be useful for that actually, if the cavalry penetrates into the settlement early, but of course they're still going to be used as heavier Elven archers. One of the few heavier Elven archers, if you can call Lindon's units heavy, one of the few examples that doesn't pull out a two-handed curved blade. Catapult is also over here from Vivarex, could be very useful. We've also got the Mighty Wands of Elos Tyrion, which Elven Rangers have got even more spice than the normal Ranger, because they have that extra missile damage, which can be a real difference maker in their potential. On the front line, lots of Noldorin units actually, Noldorin Blade Masters and Guard, as well, and they're going to be backed up by Mithlond Pikemen, and over here Mithlond Sword Masters, as well as some Harland and infantry, so a real nightmare of an infantry force here from Lindon. And a walled settlement is where Lindon can actually do very, very nicely for themselves, because they're not as exposed. It means they can sit behind their fortifications, and they'll be in far better shape when it gets down to brass tacks in melee, which is where they shine, of course, with their higher melee defense and just general damage stats. Mithlond Marines, similar actually to the Seafarers of Nindamos and Corsair Blackguards that we saw on the attack, certainly in terms of function. More Mithlond Sword Masters, we've got some... I thought that was another Noldorin unit. In fact it is, there is an Noldorin Guard in there, as well as some more pikes and infantry. And then finally, we also have some more cavalry here, some Grey Company from Son of the Dunedain. I think that's 2 units. I'm not sure I would go into the red limit on Grey Company, to be brutally honest. I think if this right here, this decision from Son of the Dunedain, could be make or break. If he doesn't nail the use of these horse archers, I would say he's effectively lost the game before it's even begun. When you're talking about a 3v5, when the 3 armies are more quality inclined, you need to nail your army selections down. This could be something of a mistake. We shall see. Dunedain Scouts. We've got some Arthedain Pikemen and Evandim, and he's also got some Knights of Numenor. So there is a big cavalry presence on the defence. This is a good opportunity for the attacking cavalry to really earn its keep. If they don't, though, this defending cavalry could be a real difference maker. We shall have to wait and see. It all comes down to execution. Without further ado, let's begin. So, the initial, I mean, to be fair, I mean 33,000 frames is a lot, but considering 8k of that was taken up with micromanagement in terms of the deployments, this is actually a fairly short battle for a Lindon one, so I would assume the cavalry play here is probably going to be extremely significant. The Grey Company are already going to start to fire body-piercing projectiles, one of the few units which is going to keep the body-piercing projectiles, but they can see already how hemmed in they are. I would personally send the cavalry against Numenor. They're much more scattered than Angmar are, and if you charge right into the guts of Angmar, you've got Barrow Wights, you've got really heavily shielded units in the Blackwatch Legion, but also Gundabad Guard. You're going to do a lot of damage with body-piercing no matter what, but even so. Four Swords of Umbar as well, didn't notice them. But Lindon have brought their unit of knights, and they do actually manage to catch the Umbar player, or one of the Umbar players anyway, napping. They need to get out of there quickly though, the Horse Swords of Ulmo. The pikes have come across, so he is going to be able to kill off a few of these Elven Knights. And like I said, they really need to get a lot of value. The frame rate is going to dip a little bit as we see sections of the wall peeled away by that catapult from Rhudaur. With this much cavalry though, it's vital they do well with it. If they don't, they're in trouble. And of course, Numenor have still got those Pharazim nobles as well. So what is Vivarex going to do with his cavalry? I think it would be foolish to go after Angmar. They were the closest to the wall in the first place, and also Angmar's not going to let them anymore. Blackwatch Legion are not anti-cavalry, but they're still going to get in the way of stuff like the Grey Company from skirmishing with the foe. Grey Company, Dunedain Scouts opening up. Umbar, actually, it looks as though going after the Corsair crossbows with the Dunedain Scouts is a good choice. You're not wasting body-piercing projectiles by going after a scattered unit, and they're a dangerous one. Oof, look at that. Frame drops, such as they are. Cavalry coming around the back, so abandoning this gate assault for now, which I can certainly understand why. And in come the Knights of Numenor, and they're going after an unprotected unit of Alcarondas Legion. I'm a little bit concerned actually by this juddering. Not exactly the sort of thing that I wanted to be seeing from this battle, but we shall soldier on for now. Knights of Numenor, they're just going to keep the cycle charging into the Alcarondas Legion here, doing the business. Is it because of the catapult? Possibly it is. Umbar right upon the gates already. Numenor also, so wasting no time here, which perhaps is to be expected given the length of this siege. The attackers are going to get right down to business, and it's going to be all or nothing really. It could also be because of the body-piercing shots from the Grey Company, to be fair, that we're seeing. Pretty poor frame rate over here, if we're being honest. Coldfell Maidens from Rhudaur coming over here to support his ally. I like the idea behind that, to be honest with you. The Coldfell Maidens are also going to get right up into the face of the Grey Company here. And, you can't really afford to lose micro. That's a little bit unfortunate though. Overlord did the hard bit in the sense that he got his Coldfell Maidens, he delivered his Coldfell Maidens to the front of the Grey Company. I guess the Grey Company are hiding. I'm surprised they didn't get spotted given that they were that close, but it is what it is, I suppose. Witch-Ram Inquisitors are over here, Warlords of Umbar are over here, so the entirety of the attacking cavalry force is now going to force Son of the Dunedain's mostly horse archer focused contingent back onto its heels, especially the Witch-Ram Inquisitors. Nothing they have is going to match them in melee, and they are actually the Witch King himself travelling alongside the Knights of the Numenor. What on earth is going on with this frame rate? All of these fortifications collapsing before our very eyes. He's going to have to leave, isn't he? And the Witch-Ram Inquisitors do catch up with the Knights of Numenor, and this was the problem. They always had that option available to them.
We must repel them.
I really need to turn these little movies off, don't I? They're such a pain in the arse. It's alright when there's only one gate, but when there's many, it turns into a bit of a problem. Knights of Numenor will get away, but the Witch-Ram Inquisitors are doing their business there. Meanwhile, a nasty looking defence, you would have to say, over here, full of many pikes, plentiful infantry up on the walls. I wonder if anyone's actually trying to make way into the settlement yet. Doesn't look like it. Looks like they're trying to attack all at once. If that's the case, I'm very much on board for that. Lindon getting ready as well. Honestly, I would not envy Peugeot's task over here. I mean, he might have a little bit of support from Rhudaur, but what is Rhudaur actually going to... Yeah, Rhudaur is going to come over here with some of their stuff. I thought they were, with units heading over this way with the catapult and such, I thought for a second that they were going to bottle it and just throw this Umbar army under the bus and try and take the path of least resistance. Glad to see they're not doing that, because they will need help against a Lindon force that is this serious in melee. Meanwhile, I think this is where, yeah, so they're going to be smashing through. Early scares for Umbar, I'm sure, when he saw that much cavalry come out, but giving his team their dues, they definitely came out here with the support, and with something like the Witch-Ram Inquisitors, you could always depend on them to do some good stuff in melee. Some units being siphoned off to other parts of the map. I would say the cavalry hasn't paid for itself yet, nowhere near. Are they going to be moving in now? Yes, they are. So we're going to see the first melee engagements. It's a questionable decision to send these Balagaya footmen up onto the walls for the reason that I said, because this is the perfect foe among the Numenor army anyway that the Dunedain peacekeepers could be facing off against, whereas the Numenorian cohort would be fighting much more evenly. One of the spearmen there tripping, losing his footing and plummeting to his death. And over here it's much the same thing. Again, you may not feel as though using... I'll rephrase that. You may feel as though using the Numenorian cohort for the walls might be a little bit reckless. For me, no. I think you're just throwing these Balagaya footmen into a situation they're never going to do that well in. They've got decent armour for their class, but the peacekeepers are just going to have far too much for them when it comes to melee. Damage being done by the catapult. There you can see some units getting down off the wall. This classic Lindon glitch, this one tower, only happens on this one, where they seem to sort of catapult up into the air and then walk down the tower. Bizarre. Some of those men-at-arms also falling away. They need to keep these units here, Son of the Dunedain. You can't afford to run away at the first sign of an attack. Meanwhile, Pandamidar coming in very, very quickly here, but the Wardens of Alos Tyrian doing the business. Going to be firing in here as Balagaya footmen and Alcarondas Legion come forward, but Lindon, Mithlon Swordmasters, backed up by Mithlon Pikemen, are Lindon infantry for a bit of extra solidity. Umbar may be a strong infantry faction, but if it comes to pure melee, Lindon are a real problem for anyone, really. Right, hopefully we can start to enter the phase of the battle now where frame rate is less of a concern. What on earth is going on here? Corsair Blackguard's trying to retreat, and very janky way here of going up there. I guess the custom walls are a little bit different, they're lower, so it looks a little bit weird, but the Noldorin Guard were absolutely butchering them, and I can only assume they haven't used their javelins yet, so they should absolutely be being retreated. You can't send your Black Guards in first when that is the foe. Morris still waiting for the other Umbar force to come forward, and still waiting for Angmar to make their play as well. Angmar just sort of sitting back. The attack's underway now. Now is the time that the attackers need to be moving as a unit, attacking all the gates. Doesn't matter if you feel as though it's too much for you, you need to do it. Arthedain men-at-arms fighting off against the Numenorian cohort, and they will lose that fight. They actually look somewhat similar, really, in terms of their armour levels and such, but two very different kinds of units here. But the Dunedain Trollslayers are in support potentially, and the Numenorian cohort are a fine unit to be going up against. That unit of cohort is really winning. Evendim Spearmen, they're going to have to try and close up, get into the faces of these Belagaya pikemen pretty quickly. Try and deal with them. That was a shot from the Grey Company. Not a bad choice. Not a bad choice at all. They'll do some good damage there. Dunedain Trollslayers out in the open, though. You don't want to be getting involved in a javelin duel with the Seafarers, to be honest with you. But the javelins coming in here, and they're doing a ton of damage to those Numenorian cohort. Friendly fire would probably be an issue with this, because how do you know who to target? The armour styles are very similar, of course. The Master against the Apprentice. And over here, this little wing of the army. Steel bows waiting. Numenorian cohort now getting up onto the wall as well, but the Rangers are here, and they're going to be doing the business. And the Peacekeepers, they've taken damage here, but they're going to be able to hold with the support of the Rangers, which is significant. Over here, still no signs of genuine movement from Angmar. Angmar are a faction you don't need to be this passive with either. They've got the ability to keep themselves alive under duress, with their armour, with stuff like the Barrow Whites, the Blackwatch Legion. It's always a bit of a puzzling one when people are too conservative with a faction like Angmar of all things. Similar story over here, I'd say, with Umbar. He's taking far too much time here to get into Lindon. And unfortunately for them as well, the Umbar force in the south and the Numenor force in the north are taking all of the punishment at the moment. Some players on the attack have to be the fall guys. There's no getting away from that, but I would question the judgment of the attackers here if this is to continue. And there's Noldorin Guards still on the walls here who've taken not many losses. Perhaps a sign of a bit of inexperience here as well. Pikes can actually be useful on the walls in certain situations, but not like this. They're not going to be able to get into formation anywhere near quickly enough, and as soon as they drop, the Noldorin Guard are going to be able to rip through them with reckless abandon. Valakathak's Guard moving forwards. All sorts of Ulmo are there. Wunsvalos Tyrion are there. Not the most well organised front line this though. The Pikes are in a column when they should be in more of a line for Lindon, but it doesn't really matter because they've got this under control to the extent where they don't need to concern themselves too much with that. Pikemen are over here, going to go back with the Grey Company perhaps for another bite of the cherry. Alcarondas Legion are there. Meanwhile, Harlanden Guard firing away. Still Wunsvalos Tyrion back there as well. Dunedain Scouts waiting, Catapult waiting. I mean, these units are not going anywhere. This is what I always say when you're in this position on the attack. These units are not going to go anywhere. They're not going to sort of disintegrate over time. You do need to be somewhat active, and at the very least Overlord is sending forward some Rhudaur marksmen so you can at least try and put some sort of pressure. But playing tag with the enemy like this takes a long time to make this worth it, and this will only pay off if Numenor and Umbar in the south can make something happen with their quality. And I don't think they're going to be able to all on their lonesome. Not with the support of stuff like the Grey Company and Troll Slayers. Some Evendim Spearmen are over here, and there are Troll Slayers getting up onto the wall now, and they're going to come over here to finish the Numenorian cohort off. Arthedain men-at-arms stood in the way long enough, and now those axes from the Dunedain are going to finish the cohort. And the help from the Grey Company as well laid waste to those pikes extremely quickly. Evendim Spearmen fighting well. More Evendim Spearmen on the way across. So I had a look back over here, and still Umbar coming forwards. They do have plenty of reserves, to be fair, and they did send some Alcarondas Legion up to help the pikes. With this combination, Noldorin Guard may actually start to struggle, because they will have to tackle the Alcarondas Legion first, and all the while they're going to be getting poked by the pikes as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, with any sort of support, the Noldorin Guard will go back to winning that fight fairly comfortably again, but it remains to be seen whether Morris will actually do that. I can only assume those Balagar footmen came back from routing, and now they're going to rejoin proceedings. possibility. Still no signs of movement over here, and from the front of the settlement at this point, something needs to be done. These Troll Slayers are out of ammunition, and they will be the first welcome for any Angmar or Rhudaur unit that comes up here. Not an enticing prospect at all. They're trying to skirmish with the enemy, trying to use Troll Shore Axe Throwers and the like, but the time has come at this point, I think, for a little bit more urgency on the part of the attackers from the front, because if not, it could be that this is one of those battles where misorganisation from the attackers once again is what costs them the fight as a whole. We've seen that a couple of times now. Numenorian cohort losing this fight. There's simply too many Arthedain men-at-arms for them to deal with. There's still spears ready to throw back any attacks that come through here. 2 units of Seafarers and the Pharaohs of Nobles, and also actually the Royal Legion of Armenello, so a serious force over here, but I don't think they'll mind too much if Numenor want to use up their javelins on Heavenly Spears. They'll probably want to keep the Troll Slayers a little bit safer. Still 2 pikes left alive as well. Interesting, interesting. Up come the steel bows. Have they used their ammunition? I can only assume that they have. There's another unit of steel bows back there. There's dead bodies in behind. I would assume this is what the steel bows have been doing. There are dead rangers in the mix there. 38 rangers remain, so fair enough, I suppose. It's better than just sitting there and watch them do nothing. But these peacekeepers are going to get overrun by the steel bows as well, so some reinforcements necessary from Arthedain, and they only have Evendom spears. Like I said, a militia unit. What have we here? Belagaya pikes. Knights of Numenor have managed to get in behind enemy lines. A line infantry unit and a pike unit. Yeah, Arthedain will still have the mobility advantage here, and they have Grey Company nearby, so Umbar can't move in over here, but they can make sure those Knights of Numenor don't do anything untoward either. They need to hope they don't come clattering into the back lines over here. Of course, their crossbows are firing as well. What at, though? Are they just launching their projectiles over the walls? It kind of looks like it. And already, Pandamidar in the south and the Numenor army in the north is looking ropey, to say the least. And so far, Lindon doing the business in melee. Those Noldorin Guard have taken losses, of course they have, but they have also claimed the lives of much of the Umbarim. Over here, it does look as though finally we've seen some movement. Pajo has moved in, and he is going to be colliding with the Lindon lines. Noldorin Guard once again over here. Belagaya footmen, not the answer, but as long as he's engaging. Got some Rhudaur swordsmen as well. They need to get something of quality in here. Javelins, maybe that's the answer. They do have a decent shot by the looks of things into the flanks of the Noldorin Guard. All sorts of Ulmo charging into the back of them as well. Oof. One's Velos Tyrion from on high as well. They're taking damage here, but they're inviting pressure onto themselves by not committing forward more. Catapult in here, trying to perhaps trying to snipe out the Arthedain. I mean, they're firing rotting meat now, so it's kind of a pointless gesture in trying to find out what they're firing at, because it won't matter either way. Harland infantry actually chasing out of the settlement. That's a little bit too bold, I think. That unit of infantry is going to get punished accordingly by the Attenmore's troll hunters, I would suggest. As the rotting meat is flung into Lindon. Such foulness has no place in a city such as this. Of course, their blackguards firing in. All sorts of Ulmo are there. They need to be careful though, because this is a glut of spears that are pushing forward at this point. And they don't want to get caught up on them too much. The Noldorin Guard, however, will relish the chance of facing the Rhudaur clansmen in melee. And we also have an assault over here. And this is more what I was talking about. Angmar have come forward in force, and already this is where the attacks are having the most joy. They're piercing into the settlement now, well, bludgeoning their way into the settlement really. There's no finesse about what Angmar do. They are brute force and ignorance. DUNEDAIN Rangers firing away, but right in front of them are trolls. Trolls can engage them in melee, stop them from firing, and kill off many of them. Lots of spears. Speaking of that, they were spear-headed, I would almost guarantee, by the Blackwatch Legion, although maybe not. They're actually fighting on the gate. Pikes are moving in now to reinforce. Get a couple of Rhudaur units in here as well, and they could be onto a winner, but momentum is key. They pushed a long way into the settlement. If they push too far without support forthcoming, stuff like the Grey Company, Wardens of the North, DUNEDAIN Rangers, Troll Slayers, Elven skirmishers of any description, they can start to whittle away at the gaps that Angmar have. So they're going to need support, and they have it. Atmor's Troll Hunters coming forwards. Troll Slayers ripping through Angmar Hellbirds. That's a little bit more of a questionable decision, but I'm not sure what else they would have done with them, to be honest with you. Just engaging, I suppose, is fine from that perspective. Grey Company preventing the advance of the Pharazim nobles. I mean, at this point, I think Numenor is just throwing everything into this gate, trying to have some sort of success. I mean, with the Grey Company and Knights of Anunus, I think they would defeat the Pharazim nobles, but that would... the Pharazim nobles are brutal against cavalry and melee. Numenorian cohort, but so depleted at this point. But with the Royal Legion, they will claim that war. Meanwhile, Seafarers of Lindamos taking hits, Evendim Spears and Troll Slayers doing the business, and they have been just outright victorious over here, I think. There's one Numenorian cohort, but everything else is routed, and the steel bows that were in the backfield have retreated. Meanwhile, there is Troll Slayers still in reserve over here from Son of the Dunedain. Got some Evendim Spearmen, some Numenas Gate Guards. The Trolls have gone a long way on their own. I would assume they're starting to fall away now. Even if it is owned... well, I say that. The Wardens of the North will do a lot of damage to Trolls in melee, but Evendim Spears and Pikemen will not. Grey Company firing away. Guardians of Khan Doom. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of damage being taken by Angmar here, but they're one of those factions that can take it on the chin. You can see there that Etnamor's Troll Hunters getting into place to use their javelins as well. Axe throwers potentially doing the same. The damage from these hand-thrown projectiles from Rhudaur will add up really, really quickly, I feel. Well, there goes our Pharazon. Cut down by one of the Numenus Knights. The defenders, however, can afford to take far less of this kind of punishment than the attackers can, so Rhudaur could be making this attack worth it all by themselves here. Meanwhile, Umbar, much of their strength has left them, but not enough of it to the point where Lindon can claim absolute victory, and the Harbingers of Castamere will only prove that. Harland infantry and Mithlon swordmasters that are left. It's a waste of javelins, really, when you think about it. But no matter. On a unit already so depleted, Warns of Alostirian, I think, are firing into the Corsair crossbows. That's a good enough target, I would suggest. And over here, they have actually gone into the settlement and been torn apart in the appropriate fashion. Grey Company supporting these Arthedain pikemen, and Pandamidar suffering a similar fate to the Numenor army in the north, albeit he still has a few more units over here that he can commit forward, blackguards, crossbowmen and the like. But now, do they have enough left from the front to be able to throw back the defenders? I'm not sure. Pedro coming forward with Belagire archers, that's not going to be what the situation calls for against Elven infantry. Again, if you're going to throw forward a unit like this, they need to be acting as a meat shield for something a little bit stronger. Mithlon pikemen. There is some Noldorin guard as well. Victory seems certain. Only a fool can lose this battle. Quite so. There's Ferodrum javelins as well, though they are nasty stuff. But they're getting shot as well by Wardens of Alostirian and Harland and Guard from the high ground. Here are the Blackguards, doing lots of damage out to the Noldorin Guard, those Ferodrums in particular. See the numbers absolutely plummet. Need to get out of here, actually, the Noldorin Guard, because otherwise they will be killed to a man by the Ferodrum javelins, one of the scarier units of javelins the game has to offer. Looking pretty crispy, but not green flames, so it's not the Witchers. And you have to say, the defenders, for all the slightly disjointed manner in the way the attackers have approached this thus far, I would say a few questionable organisational choices on a macro scale have started to creep in here for the defenders, and that's often a real problem for them. Evendim Spearmen are broken, Witcher-on Pikemen looking like they might break, Barrow Whites taking damage, Flaming Arrows coming forth. Could be enough to break these Coldfell Maidens, we shall see. I don't know though, things looking perhaps more under control here. Dunedain Rangers, it could be that as soon as they pushed in, it's hard to judge the effect that all the Rangers, Wardens of the North and Grey Company had as they set up a nice crossfire here as Angmar started to push forwards. Maybe they didn't go all in enough, and that could prove to be fairly fatal. Arrows zipping by from the Dunedain Rangers. There's still Numenor in the north. Evendim Spearmen are not going to be up to the task of killing off Royal Legion of Armenelos, who are bloodied and bruised, but still alive. And steel bows moving in, so technically Numenor here into the settlement, overall just about victorious. Having said that, I feel as though that's because resources had to be diverted elsewhere, which is all part and parcel of being in a siege. Do these steel bows still have ammunition, I wonder? They've got their blades out for now. Even if they are out of ammunition, to be fair, they're still decent enough in melee that they still have a part to play. There goes the Umbar general. And in fact, right here is where he fell. So Pandamidar's general does fall. Umbar will respond better to a morale shock like that than most. Oh, there goes the crazy kill animation again. There he goes 2D and T-poses into the ground. But they could still, to be fair, blackguards, of course their crossbowmen will definitely be vulnerable to a morale shock, so killing the general always going to be a good thing, of course, for the defenders in this situation. Morris still keen to hold on to this outer gate as well, and why not? They're doing a lot of good killing, but at this point you would have to say perhaps the odds are starting to tilt against them just in terms of numbers, and that armour stat is low enough to the point where they may start to struggle. You can see over here as well the damage done to this tower, which is a little bit strange. Building damage 0. Well, regardless, yeah, they've still got plenty of reinforcements back here. The genuine upside to this being where basically most of Umbar, in fact all of Pedro's Umbar army, and most of the Rhudaur force were over here. Rhudaur also is offering some support to Angmar, but over here things still going decently well for the defenders. Dunedain Rangers mucking in melee, pulling out their side swords. Peacekeepers moving forward as well, who probably will actually do fairly well against the damaged Barrow White unit. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Grey Company. Very, very depleted, but it's turned into a very scrappy fight this, which generally speaking favours the attackers if they can get themselves organised. Arthedain men-at-arms, 24 of them remain. Very few Evendim spears. They have managed to bring down 4 more Royal Legion though. It goes to show how much damage they've already taken, I suppose. What's going on over here? Oh yeah, it's just the one depleted unit. Meanwhile, Numenor, they are in the backfields. They did actually have some ammunition left. And do they have enough actually to respond to this? I would say they probably do. The Grey Company, however, are just gonna... They need to siphon off a unit of infantry to deal with this unit. Fair play to the Numenor player here, as he has managed to make a nuisance of himself, even if his army has been largely defeated. He's still contributing to his team. Now though, Dunedain Rangers are going to be firing, and they will get defeated, of course. Arthedain men-at-arms moving up now. Steel bow is probably enough to defeat them still in melee, but it will prevent them from firing, which is a concern, of course. Meanwhile, still Angmar not able to make it all the way up the hill, not on a consistent basis anyway. Black Wolves have revealed themselves. Rhudaur Berserkers have come forward, immediately attracting the attention of those Dunedain Rangers up on the hill. Range was always going to be how the defenders would have to win this, and it is a truly hideous sight, all of these corpses. Evendim Spearmen largely the ones having to hold the line now though, so if they don't do damage quickly they could be in trouble. These Black Bolts, however, are getting dusted on the approach by Arthedain marksmen and by Rangers, and of course once their hit points are gone they are in real trouble. Actually the Rangers are not targeting them, which surprises me a little bit, I must say. Dismounted Knights of Anubis could intercept them in melee, but it's not ideal. Arrows at point blank. They've probably done enough damage to the Black Walls, to be fair, where the Knights of Anubis will be quite comfortable in melee now though. Troll Slayers being mobilised, son of the Dunedain moving in with his reinforcements now. What's happening with Lindon though? Are they able to hold on? There's a few units from Arthedain down here. None of their like super high tier units though, just some basic stuff. Mithlon Marines taking damage. Rodrum Javelins moving in. Oof. It's a risky shot. I can understand why they're not actually going for a flaming shot here, because they're trying to thread the needle, but even without that, I would say it's not worth going after this. You're killing Noldor and Blade Masters. The gamble not paying off. Reforged Javelins, surrounding some Noldor Guard and some Mithlond Sword Masters. What will they do now? Now I would put it back onto flaming shot now that the Noldor and Blade Masters are out of the way. Still holding on though, aren't they? What about Pandamidar? Pedro's still got his Warlords of Umbar in here, going after some stragglers. Nothing too important though, and there are spears in the way, so good organisation here from the defenders. They've got everything nicely set up. I mean, at this point, based on the frames that are left, I would assume that it's either going to be a defending victory on the walls or a defending loss on the walls. There will be no retreating back to the island, I would have thought. And that's how I would play it as the defenders. I think you live by the sword and die by the sword if you're in this situation. I think you need to just do the business. Rhudaur Berserkers getting shot. DUNEDAIN scouts with a little bit of ammunition. They will certainly help the Abendum Spearmen doing their best to hold on. Admirably as well, you would have to say. Meanwhile, yeah, the Royal Legion of Armadillo, there's not enough of them left. Troll Slayers, I think quality here. The fact they still have the Troll Slayers that they held in reserve for a while, and that unit of Knights of Numenor means they're going to win over here, I would suggest. There's going to be not an awful lot the attackers can do about that, so if they're going to win, it will have to be via the Lindon pathway. And that's never really what you want to be seeing if you are on the attack. And it could be that organisation was the real killer. When you attack in different stages, it allows sort of gaps to be found by cavalry as well. If you all attack at once, you can sort of hold your positions. You can make sure that cavalry can't really escape, or at least you have a much better chance of doing that. Dismounted knights. What's this? Wardens of the North moving backwards. DUNEDAIN scouts. Rangers. More rangers there as well. Arthedain marksman. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Alcarondas Legion trying to do the business, but even they are going to struggle. Wardens of the North are in the way with their long swords. Even the artillery crew is going to be mucking in melee at this stage. DUNEDAIN Rangers here in the backfield. A lot of these units are quite depleted at this point, you would have to say. I don't really see the point in retreating back to the island other than the sake of it at this point. If you're looking at this purely from a we want to win this game perspective, there's no need to turn around. There's no need. And I think actually they've just seen that, because I think all of the arrows flicked back the other way, and yeah, I think that's what they're doing at this point. They've realised at this point they have the beating, and I think Loris here, I think he was just going through the motions for a second there. He was like, well, we retreat because that's what we normally do on this map. No need. And actually, he may have ended up throwing these Arthedain units here under the bus for no good reason, because he's retreated and you didn't need to. So of course, their crossmen are back here as well. Gonna try and do the business. Routing Abendum Spearmen. There's still some Reforged Javelins in here, who, to be fair to them, have been one of those attacking units which have been doing really very well for themselves in this battle thus far. Those large spiky war clubs. Rhudaur pikemen as well. Let's see here. What's going on over here? Not much left for Angmar now. Nor the Rhudaur reinforcements. In fact, Angmar look as though they are gone. They may have been one of those that admitted defeat. Units that have been defeated scrambling for the hills. The barren wastes, as it were. I'm sure that the area around Lindon isn't quite so bleak and depressing. That water over there. Is that an ocean I spy? It is. Kind of hard to tell in the distance. That's weird. I think perhaps this is one of those examples of a map that's got its sort of distant terrain flicked around a little bit. The ocean is supposed to be on the other side. Because as you can see, as we go over here, there's a cliff over there. Meanwhile, There goes the Rhudaur general, and at this point, the action is all condensed over here. Pedro is now moving forward with really the last roll of the dice. Arthedain Shield Guard, who perhaps should have been committed slightly earlier. Corsair Blackguards dumping their ammunition to the Arthedain Pikemen, but there are scarier opponents to be fought than the Arthedain Pikemen, which is probably why Son of the Dunedain is allowing him to do this. He's like, yeah, we're going to take grisly losses from these javelins, but better the Arthedain Pikes than something else. Dunedain Trollslayers are here, Mythlon Marines are here, javelins being flung in. Dangerous javelins as well. Mythlon Marines are comparable to the Corsair Blackguards, the Trollslayers are better. Arthedain Marksmen ballooning those shots way up into the air, but at this point it is of no concern, and yet you'd have to say at this point the defenders looking at good value for their win. An inevitable win by the looks of things. Warlords of Umbar. Still alive, but I don't know if this cavalry is really going to be able to do anything significant here as we enter into the final stages. I think there's nothing left over here at this point. Indeed, the last of the Frandline Berserkers down. There's a dead troll in there as well. Not a lot left, but didn't need to be a lot left. Now, javelins being thrown in. Pikes and Wardens of the North, Nolder and Blade Master, 24 of them is still a significant amount. And these heavily armoured spearmen and infantry, as tanky as Umbar can be, they are not going to have enough left to get through the defenders now. Mythlon Marines adding themselves, of course they do double as being decent infantry, so they'll be able to do a job here in stopping any progress that the attackers were thinking of making. Similar story over here as well. Mythlon Marines, Corsair crossbowmen trying to do their thing, and they will charge in and prevent those javelins from firing. There really is just clean-up duty here, but Umbar will not go quietly into that good night. What have we got going on over here? Not a lot. Dismounted knights could be being used more effectively. Horns in the North getting charged down by some warlords of Umbar. With every swing of those longswords, those knights will be counting their lucky stars if they manage to survive it. Crossbowman, another unit of Harbingers, and you can see the differing, this is something we'll go into in the results screen as well, but you can see the differing styles with which the attackers wanted to approach this. The North and South armies were very aggressive, throwing everything in. Rhudaur, Angmar tried to be a little bit more clever with it. Umbar, a bit too slow for my liking as well. These elites, they needed to be committed far sooner. I mean, it's too late now, regardless of how he uses his Harbingers of Castamere. They needed to be committed sooner, I think. You collapse in at full strength, there's always going to be some losers from the attacker's point of view there. Someone's going to have to take it on the chin, but that's how you win these games. Of all of the approaches, I do have to say I preferred the Angmar Rhudaur approach. It had the right balance, I think. There was a mixture, nice combined arms. But because it was the only place they were going about their business in that way, when they did push forward, the crossfire of Rangers, Grey Company and Javelins was always going to just throw them back the other way very quickly. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that they probably wouldn't have done all that well. Angmar especially, seeing as they were the ones in the vanguard. Dismounted Knights for Numenor moving forward. They do actually get a volley off there, the crossbows. Warlords of Umbar. Things are getting a little bit dicey for them. Axemen. And to be fair, the Dismounted Knights are not the best anti-cavalry unit, but the Wardens, I'm going to say Warlords of the North then, that's not right. Similar names, at least similar start. When you're on autopilot, that sort of thing, your brain just says, you know what, we're just going to lump everything together. Arthedain pikemen are over here as well. At this point it's... I mean, it's interesting to see that there is actually still about 2,800 frames left. It does go to show that some of these Umbar units are very resilient, including the Harbingers, still 25 of them remaining, but they're getting caught in and amongst all of the nastiest Dunedain armies. Dunedain units, I should say. There goes the Lindon General, though. Those Warlords of Umbar still making a nuisance of themselves. Only one of them has fallen, actually. Eventually, of course, it won't matter too much, because they're going to have to charge into stuff like Troll Slayers, which with every swing of their axe, they're going to bring down another cavalry unit model. Archers of Castamere doing their best on the front line here, but their best on this occasion, unfortunately for them, is not going to be good enough. Little Marines back here as well. What have we got going on? Dunedain Peacekeepers trying to tag some of these warlords. One of them does fall as a result of it as well. They are ultimately going to be able to get through and charge into the more vulnerable unit of infantry, but they're also getting shot at all times now, so they're going to be the last unit remaining, aren't they? Certainly won't be the Harbingers, as they have to fight back the Horde, the Dunedain Horde. I mean, to be fair, this is pretty much the entirety of the defending armies at this point. A few Elves, a few Dunedain. It's been a good victory, I think, for the defenders, and it all comes down to organisation. Defenders had their themselves organised far better. I still stand by what I said, that you don't need to micromanage quite as hard as they clearly did at the start of the battle, but in terms of deployment zones, but during the battle they did very, very nicely. And the attackers, pretty much the polar opposite. They didn't organise themselves. Mithlon Marines getting charged. Turn around here. Dunedain Rangers firing at point blank. Dunedain Rangers plugging away. Interesting. Very interesting. And the Warlords, I mean, they're just gonna basically be a chase at this point. He's going to try and pad his kill count as much as possible, Pejo, but I would still say that doesn't change anything about what I think of this battle. I think the armies in the south and the north were maybe a little bit too aggressive, and he was too slow. And as a result, even the ones that got it more akin to what I would expect, in the fact that Angmar forward, supported by Rhudaur, I like that, but because they would, like, the attackers were so fragmented in what they were doing, the defenders were able to focus down. Essentially, in 3 waves, they were able to focus down the attacking armies. The Grey Company. I mean, they can chase down the Warlords, but there's only one left, and it is the General. Castamere himself. What will he do? He's getting shot. Will he live to fight another day? It would be shameful if he did, to be honest with you, because that would mean that the player admits defeat. Again, I don't mind this. I think there is, if it lasts for like 5,000 frames-ish, I would say that it does outwear its welcome a little bit, and that you just need to sort of take your medicine as the attacker. But is he going to admit defeat? He may very well do here. Will he shame his general, Castamere? I'm not sure if he will. In the Grey Company, I think... nope, he is going to turn around. Fair play. He will die in battle. He does manage to kill off some of these Grey Company as well, but the Grey Company, no pushovers, and there are more of them than him. And there he goes. Indeed it is a clear victory. A good defence, and often this is a map where we see the attackers win because the defenders just don't have the staying power. But on this occasion, I would say, yeah, it comes down to, I think, organisation. If the attackers put on more of a unite, which I thought they were going to do, to be fair, because there was a little bit of a wait, and then, you know, the north and south attacked, but the others didn't, and from there it all sort of became a little bit bitty, a little bit, yeah, there was definitely room for improvement there. But I would say if I were to pick an attacking MVP, it probably would be Rhudaur, because he did support in the way that you would expect. I mean, it's not because of the kills, it's because of the support. Angmar, you know, they also, you know, they took it on the chin, as Angmar is supposed to do. If anything, my criticism of Tsunami would be, as Angmar, you need to be doing that sooner in the fight. You know, there's no real need to sit back and wait. As Angmar, you can take a beating. If the enemy don't, you know, decide to give you that beating, then you will be victorious. It's one of the other. Like, you will either facilitate the other teams on the map that are with you doing well, or you yourself will get the results that you want. If you do hang back, you're doing Angmar a bit of a disservice, which is perhaps why I would say Rhudaur I would give the MVP, because it's more how Rhudaur are meant to be played. As for the defenders, again, organisation, they did the business. Lindon as well, getting a lot of kills, as the elves, perhaps, as you would expect. Let's see what did the damage for Arthedain though. Catapult, average performance, perhaps under average actually. You'd expect it to be doing slightly better. Peacekeepers did very well actually on the walls, supported as they were. Arthedain men-at-arms struggled a bit, but they do tend to. They're a very underwhelming kind of unit. Evendom spearmen, I would say, do exactly the same job as them, albeit for less, and also with the ability of with the anti-cavalry utility. Gate guards, they were pushed out the way, I think, by Angmar, so that explains their poorer performance. The Grey Company were a good investment in the end. I have to say, that cavalry, it could have been make or break, but in the end, the cavalry did prove to be very worthwhile, perhaps because so much of it was made up of Grey Company. That was always going to be an interesting one. Troll Slayers did very well in melee. Range is actually less effective than you would expect to see, which is quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed. Son of the Dunedain, what did the business for him? His Rangers did much better. His Grey Company did about the same, in fact, perhaps slightly worse. Yeah, I'd say Vivorax's Grey Company notably better. Wards of the North did quite well. Peacekeepers, again, a good performance, I would say. The defenders did what was expected of them, and in the face of a rather disorganised attacking force, they were victorious. So, big thank you to Vivorax for giving me this replay, and a big thank you to all the players for being a part of it. It's nice to see the Grey Havens once again. Anyway, as for moving forward, I do still have some replays to be getting on with in the near future, but now that I've sort of gone back to doing 3 videos a week to sort of make up for the fact that streaming is temporarily out of order, I will be sort of constantly looking for more replays. Otherwise, what I will have to do is dip into the campaign and do pre-records of them rather than solely streaming them, just to sort of make sure that I have enough to be keeping the schedule up. More to the point, however, I'm not sure. There could already have been a channel update video that I'd released, or perhaps I may have talked about this in a stream that I do at some stage, which could be something that happens, but we'll see. Like, it could be that I do a stream on Christmas Eve or something, because Christmas Day and Boxing Day probably not going to be all that viable, but we shall see. But the topic of which could be what's going to be happening post New Year and post degree, when I hand in my dissertation in February, because it was looking like I was going to go down one path in particular, but now there are 2 potentially very different, well, not very different things I could be doing in terms of content, but very different things I could be doing in terms of start date, which may mean that the big changes to the channel, which will have to come about eventually, could come sooner, or they could come slightly later. Don't know really. It's really one or the other, and I'm not sure which it is. But regardless of which, the changes are coming, and it will be upon us at some stage. And it is something that I do need to put a little bit more thought into, to how I'm going to reorganise the channel to keep it viable as I move forward. Clearly, I won't be able to do as much as I have been doing under lockdown. That's a given, really. Anyone who was expecting otherwise, I think it was wishful thinking at best, because it's just not going to be as possible as it was. The channel will remain, however. I do have sort of a minimum amount that I would be happy with doing, and a minimum amount that will be viable regardless of what I do. More on that later though, because it is something that I still need to work out the details on. Basically, there are levels to how much content I'm going to be able to do depending on what it is I move into, and I will need to sort of work out the details and sort of have plans in place depending upon what's actually going to be happening. A little bit of a ramble this, but it is worth talking about. I mean, I will be talking about this in greater detail elsewhere, and not just wedged at the end of a video like this, because I'm not sure how many people stay and watch the post-game screens. But that is worth bearing in mind, because the details of which I can get into at a later date in a dedicated video, I think, because it would do better there. Perhaps if I do a little mini stream sort of sometime during the day on Christmas Eve. It won't be anything like campaign or anything. It'll just be sort of like a chit chat, really, where I will be talking about the channel, and I'll be able to be a little bit more interactive with people, which I think would be a little bit better. So if possible, that will have already happened, and so this is all just information that you already know. If not, however, it's very possible that because of the schedule of people that there won't be a stream such as that until the new year, and this is going to be one of those replays which probably comes out fairly early in January, I would say, because I'll probably push it ahead in the schedule just a little bit. But yeah, the change is upon us at this point, and it's a change that perhaps should have happened sooner. So we've actually gotten a little bit more out of the schedule that I've been able to keep up until now than I thought I would have done. But yeah, it could be that imminent change is upon the channel, something that may have already been talked about. But if it is a stream that is in January that I go into these details, then I may actually have more information, more concrete information about what's going to be happening. Regardless, enough of that, I think, because such things can wait until later. But yeah, I hope that your festive period was nice, because by the time this comes out, Christmas and New Year will have already come and gone, even though from my perspective neither of them have happened yet. I hope both of them were happy for you, and hopefully 2021 is better for all of us. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.